Hey everyone, Todd the TV Guy here, and this is my review for Netflix's new animated series, Long Story Short. From the very start, this show interested me because it is from the same creator of BoJack Horseman, and that's Raphael Bob Waksberg, also with Lisa Hannawalt doing a lot of the supervising production and original design for the show as well. If you've seen my channel before this video, I've had very high praise for BoJack Horseman in the past. If you haven't seen him, I encourage you to go watch some of the videos I've made on that, but I absolutely love BoJack Horseman. It's probably my second favorite TV show of all time at this very moment. The list changes a little bit, but obviously that indicates that I love it a whole lot. The brilliance of BoJack shows in the form of a tragic comedy in which the main character especially, which is BoJack Horseman, goes through a lot of traumatic character development and character reflection throughout the show, where we're shown his childhood, his adult success, fame, and how it affects him, and how it all intertwines into creating this, frankly, just really messy and messed up human being. Well, I guess not human being, horse, but he's humanized, essentially. And then it follows the destructive, sometimes redeeming, but normally destructive and depressing journey of him interacting with the other people, characters in his life. And following that story, even though the comedy is great, it is very tragic, hence the label as a tragic comedy. This animated series, Long Story Short, at least in season 1 here, takes a bit of a different approach. It has a similar animation style and some of the same type of comedy sprinkled throughout, but all in all, of course, it has a much different plot and storyline and way of delivering the message. Where a lot of the revelations are pretty mind-blowing and shocking in your face in BoJack, a lot of them in this show are more gradual and subtle in nature. This gradual realization of connected details throughout the show is largely due to its time-jumping narrative, in which the show often starts an episode in a year dating all the way back to the early 1990s, and sometimes can later in the episode jump all the way forward to as late as 2022 in terms of the timeline of the show. And so we see the same characters sometimes in the same episodes, 30 years apart or anywhere in between. So it's really interesting to follow the characters on that timeline. Of course, it's important to mention here the actual plot of the show and at least broadly outline it, because it's not super clearly defined from the beginning of the show exactly the points they're trying to get at, but slowly, as I said, it is kind of a slow grind type of first season here where you gradually uncover some details and themes that they may be touching on with these characters and how they interact. Now, it takes place in a Jewish American family, and it becomes clear from the very beginning that the nucleus of this family, the one that kind of steals the show and that everyone's life revolves around in a way, throughout the entire timeline of the show. When they're little kids, they're always worried about what she thinks. Same as when they're older, it seems like they're always trying to please her and make sure that what they do is of her approval. That's the mother of the family, Naomi. As we jump around throughout the season, we see that the children, especially the older two siblings, kind of view her as a nuisance and that she gets in the way more than she helps them in life. This dynamic of Naomi and her relationship with both Avi and Shira is highlighted extensively throughout the first season of the show, and how it kind of sticks with them all the way throughout their adulthood and even to the point after her unfortunate death due to the coronavirus in 2020. When we see the characters in 2022, it's still a heavy point of conversation between these siblings, especially. What would mom want? Mom taught me this. I have this trauma from mom. So there's a lot of that type of dialogue going on throughout the entire series. No matter if Naomi is even in the scenes, kind of seems like she's the sun, they're the planets, and they orbit around her. She has left an imprint on them, for better or for worse. Usually the kids seem to think it's for worse. She's left that imprint on them for life. And then there's the younger sibling, Yoshi, who's actually maybe my favorite character in the show. He's a bit of a goofy character, kind of reminiscent of Todd from BoJack Horseman, but in, of course, a much different light. And I think he seems to be, at least on screen of what we've seen so far, a little bit of the least bothered from his mother from what we've seen. Now, later on in the season, he seems very worried to reveal to her that he has changed his faith. And so that's a point of contention with him and his mother. But overall, I would say Avi and the older sister seem a lot more bothered by the mother on a day-to-day basis. Like within their psyche, they're just always kind of affected by her and the trauma that she kind of created and the anxiety that she brings out of them is always pertinent throughout this season. Now, though a lot of the settings of the show and some of the topics of conversation revolve around their Jewish faith as a family and how some of the kids grow up to have a lack thereof of that faith, and in their teachings to their new kids and everything like that, the show has a lot of other, I think, more important and poignant points that it touches on, mainly within that familial relationship between the kids and the parents, especially the mother, as I referenced earlier in the video. And I think this really starts to come to light and meets its breaking point in the later episodes of the season, especially when Avi, the older brother of Shira, and Yoshi kind of confronts the mother and goes all out on her when she invites them all over to act like they were trying to have this intervention for Yoshi when he wasn't even really having problems. She just wanted them to all come together, even though the kids had kind of been distancing themselves from her because of how she treated them in their childhood and beyond. In this series of scenes, Avi kind of opens her eyes to the fact that she's always just looking for what he does wrong and never complimenting him for what he does right. Never pointing out, hey, I appreciate your help. You look nice. Always saying, what's that stain on your shirt? Or why couldn't you do this a little better? Or why couldn't you be more like so-and-so? You know, always pointing out the flaws in someone can really degrade their mental over time. And despite this truth being apparent to us, the viewers, throughout the entire season and how she treated her children, it was never really brought to her attention, at least by the child that she would take it the most seriously from, Avi, until later on in the season where we see it. And I think that's where the sequencing of the show and the jumping timeline comes in such a genius way. And so yeah, the kids are all important, of course. Shira and her relationship with her wife and the kids that they end up adopting. Also, the younger brother Yoshi, who I've said, he might be my favorite character in the show. He's really goofy, really fun, gets himself into a lot of funny shenanigans. Some of my favorite humor surrounds him, and also had a good scene with like an old neighbor of theirs. I really enjoyed that episode in the middle of the season. I think it was 4 or 5 out of the 10 episodes we get here. But anyway, even though those characters are very important, the father, Elliot, also somewhat important. Probably we get the least character depth from him of any of them. But although all those characters are important, I think it does boil down a lot of the way to the mother and her child, Avi. I think their relationship is kind of the nucleus of the show. Even though I think it all revolves around the mother, Naomi, Avi is the one that she really takes criticism from to heart in this season that we see. And he's also the one that seems most affected and most different as a result of the mistreatment from his mother. And so yeah, the themes of like untapped trauma from your parents and then kind of carrying that into adulthood, you know, the fact that it went unaddressed for so long, I think had negative impacts on everyone involved, and that's slowly but surely brought to light throughout the sequencing of this season. And though this show leans into some Jewish family stereotypes for sure, there are probably some of these stereotypes that are rooted in some truth, and I think it shines a light on the way that Naomi, based on their faith and its practices, kind of smothers and hampers her children's growth and development in a way that she doesn't even realize in the moment. And so it's just interesting, like I keep saying, with the timeline jumping throughout the seasons, you know, when we get a scene from their childhood flash and their mother's yelling about them, about, Avi's girlfriend mixing up the kosher and non-kosher dishes in their kitchen, and then seeing a flash forward 20 years later to how Avi and Jennifer are raising their child. And then obviously Avi and Jennifer end up being divorced, and how they handle things kind of points to the fact that it's a direct result of how they were treated and reacted to situations in their childhood. And so kind of relaying these messages in a way that isn't chronological, but is sequential in nature due to the fact that it reflects how they were treated by their parents and, you know, goes directly into showing how that changes outcomes later in their life and how they're going to implement different methods to try to avoid being like their parents. So I think the sequencing is really good from that standpoint, really good at hiding details for a while until they need to be revealed, and also just bringing some of the surrealism of the show to life in a slow, gradual method, like the wolf episode and a couple other instances where it just felt like appropriate timing by the writers and producers of the show. So overall, I'm pretty complimentary of the show. I did really enjoy the first watch. I'm not going to act like after season 1 I think it's as good as BoJack Horseman, but That's a really big bar to live up to. The only reason I keep comparing it is because it's by the same creator. Does have a similar feel in some senses, especially the animation style. And like I said, some of that comedy, even though I think the comedy in this one is a little less punchy, a little less risky and in your face, you're not getting as bold of explorations of these characters as well, in my opinion, but it's still really, really good television and some good, funny, understated humor throughout this season. And it's already been renewed for a season 2 on Netflix, so that's great to hear, even though I will admit this show isn't getting quite as much buzz online as I thought it would. So to summarize, this show that was created by the same creators as BoJack Horseman is not quite as good, in my opinion, at least so far, but BoJack wasn't a home run 10 out of 10 after its first season either, and I think it kind of took some time to find its footing. I think this show has actually already found its footing. It's just not quite as bold and explorative as a show like BoJack was, and groundbreaking in terms of its themes and messages. But the messages in this are still really good, and I like the understated humor. Like I said, it's witty humor. It's not like laugh out loud humor like you're going to get in a show like BoJack or other comedies maybe, but stuff that I really like and that clearly is thought through a lot by the writers. There was a really good joke in the last episode when a bartender's talking to this kind of stuck-up guy who's bragging about himself. You'll have to watch the show for the specific joke, but that's one that comes to mind. A lot of good humor. A lot of good family dynamic stuff. I love digging into trauma of a family. It kind of hits home. And just like seeing how these characters react and respond to each other. And I just really like character-driven storytelling. That's what you're getting with the show. So if you enjoy that as well, I would definitely recommend. If I had to give a grade of this first season, all things considered, I'm going to say it's like a strong 7 to a light 8 to give a rating like Anthony Fantano would. But yeah, I'd give it around an 8, maybe slightly below that. If I'm doing decimals, maybe like a 7.8 out of 10. But generally, that's the drift. And I'm excited to see how they build off the ending of this season, where they all kind of sat down for a minute. We're all finally together for a good reason to try to support the younger brother Yoshi in his exploration. He was kind of at this motel all by himself. They all pull up and they kind of sit down for a second and reminisce and are like, what would mom want us to do? And a time when they were looking back on their mother and their relationship with her in a healthy and more positive way, because usually they're just reflecting on how she has damaged them. So this show is good. It's still really deep, not on the level of BoJack, but I still really appreciate the themes and topical focuses here. Something that really interests me. I think you guys should give it a chance. Like I said, it's Long Story Short on Netflix, just premiered in August, so still pretty fresh. I'll probably give it a rewatch here maybe sometime next year, see how it hits for me then. But otherwise, I'll be waiting for season 2. If you guys want more TV and occasionally movie content, this is your place to be. You can like this video, subscribe to my channel, helps out more than you know, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks. It's Ty the TV Guy, out.